Drummerly.com Unlimited Drama Series.
The champagne bubbled mockingly in crystal glasses as my wife Sarah stood at the head of the mahogany conference table, her victory smile sharper than the steak knives scattered across the white tablecloth. The entire board of directors, 12 suits worth more than most people's houses, applauded as she accepted her Top Salesperson of the Year award from Blackstone Industries. "Thank you all," Sarah purred, her blonde hair catching the chandelier light in the private dining room of the Ritz-Carlton. "This wouldn't have been possible without my incredible support system." She turned those ice blue eyes toward me, sitting quietly in my off-the-rack suit among the Armani crowd. Here it comes, I thought. The ritual humiliation. Especially my husband, David. "Tell me, honey, how does it feel watching me succeed while you do absolutely nothing productive with your life?" The room erupted in laughter. Board members nearly choked on their lobster bisque. Sarah's mother, Margaret, practically cackled from her seat beside the company founder, Sarah's father, Robert Blackstone himself. I took a slow sip of my wine, letting the laughter die down naturally. My heart was hammering, but my voice came out steady as granite. "That's a great question, Sarah. Really insightful." I stood up, straightening my tie. "But since we're sharing tonight, I have something even more interesting to tell everyone." The laughter faded. Sarah's smile flickered. "I own 77% of Blackstone Industries. And Sarah, you're fired." For exactly 3 seconds, the room was dead silent. Then, someone snorted. Then the laughter started again, louder this time. "David, sit down," Sarah hissed, her cheeks flushing pink. "You're embarrassing yourself." "Am I?" I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a thick manila envelope. "Robert, would you like to explain to your daughter about our little arrangement? Or should I?" Robert Blackstone, my father-in-law, the man who built this company from nothing, slowly stood up. His weathered face was grim as he looked at his daughter. "Sarah, your husband isn't joking. 3 months ago, I transferred controlling interest of the company to David. I'm tired of watching you and your mother treat him like garbage, while he's the only one in this family with any real integrity." The silence this time wasn't broken by laughter. Margaret's face went white as printer paper. "You can't be serious," Sarah whispered. I opened the envelope and spread the legal documents across the table. Stock transfer certificates, board resolutions, all signed, sealed, and notarized. Dead serious. And since I'm now majority owner, let me make my first executive decision. Sarah Blackstone, you're terminated, effective immediately. Security will escort you out. I'd been waiting 3 years to say those words. 3 years of being called a deadbeat, a loser, a charity case. 3 years of watching Sarah parade around like she built this empire herself, when the truth was, she'd inherited everything and earned nothing. The best part? The look on her face as reality crashed down like a demolition ball. "This is impossible," Margaret shrieked, her voice cutting through the stunned silence. "Robert, you can't give our family business to this nobody." "I can and I did," Robert said calmly. "David's more of a son to me than Sarah's ever been a daughter. At least he appreciates what we've built here instead of taking it for granted." Sarah's hands were shaking as she grabbed the documents, scanning them frantically. "There has to be a mistake. These can't be legal." "Oh, they're legal," I said, finally allowing myself to smile. "I had the best lawyers in the city review every word. Turns out your father was getting pretty tired of your attitude, too." The board members sat frozen, their expensive dinners growing cold as they watched the Blackstone dynasty implode in real time. I could practically hear their minds racing, calculating which side to back in this corporate coup. Sarah looked around the room desperately, searching for allies. "This is insane. You can't all just sit there and let this happen." But they could, and they were. Money talks, and I was now speaking their language fluently. "Security's on their way up," I announced, checking my watch. "Sarah, you have about 2 minutes to say goodbye to your corner office. I'd make them count." The conference room door opened, and 2 uniformed security guards stepped inside. Sarah's face crumpled as the reality hit her like a freight train. "David, please," she whispered. "We can work this out. We're married. We're supposed to be a team." I laughed. Actually laughed. For the first time in months. "A team? Is that what you call it when you spend 3 years telling everyone I'm worthless?" When you make jokes about how you're carrying me financially, when you, ma'am, we need you to come with us. One of the security guards interrupted gently. Sarah looked at me one last time, her eyes filled with something I'd never seen before. Fear. Good. She should be afraid. As the guards escorted her toward the door, I called out, "Oh, and Sarah, don't bother coming home tonight. The locks have been changed." The door closed behind them with a soft click, leaving me alone with the board and my in-laws. Margaret looked like she was about to have a stroke. "This isn't over," she snarled at me. "I'll fight this. I'll destroy you." "You're welcome to try," I said, sitting back down and cutting into my steak. "But I should mention, I also own the house you're living in, the one Robert put in my name last month. So you might want to start looking for a new place." Robert nodded grimly. Margaret, I've had enough of your poison too. David's giving you 30 days to find somewhere else to live." I'd never seen a woman's face turn that particular shade of purple before. It was almost artistic. The rest of the dinner passed in awkward silence, broken only by the sound of forks against plates and Margaret's occasional muttered threats. The board members kept shooting glances at me, probably wondering if I was some kind of criminal mastermind who'd been playing the long game. They weren't entirely wrong. As we filed out of the private dining room, Robert pulled me aside. "You know this is just the beginning," he said quietly. "Sarah and Margaret won't go down without a fight. They'll make your life hell." I straightened my shoulders and looked him in the eye. Let them try. I've been in hell for 3 years already. At least now I'm the one holding the keys. Walking to my car in the hotel parking garage, I felt something I hadn't experienced in a long time. Power. Real, tangible power. Not the fake authority that comes from a title or a corner office, but the kind that comes from holding all the cards while everyone else scrambles to figure out the game. My phone buzzed with a text message. "Sarah, we need to talk. This is insane." I deleted it without responding. We'd talked enough for one lifetime. Tomorrow, the real war would begin. I woke up the next morning to find my car keyed from bumper to bumper, both side mirrors smashed, and all 4 tires slashed. The word "bastard" was spray painted across my windshield in bright red letters. Subtle as always, Sarah. Standing in my driveway in my bathrobe, sipping coffee from my favorite mug, I had to admire her commitment. She'd probably been out here at 3 in the morning with a can of Krylon and a box cutter, working out her frustrations on my Honda Civic. My phone had been buzzing nonstop since 6 a.m. 17 missed calls from Sarah, 12 from Margaret, and 6 from numbers I didn't recognize. The voicemails were a symphony of rage, desperation, and creative profanity. "David, you son of a bitch, call me back right now," Sarah's voice screeched from my phone speaker. "This is my company. My family built this business." Delete. "You think you're so smart," Margaret's voice hissed, "but you have no idea what you've gotten yourself into. I will ruin you, you pathetic little worm." Delete. The unknown numbers were probably Sarah's friends calling to tell me what a monster I was for destroying their precious princess. I deleted those without listening. My neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, peeked over the fence separating our driveways. She was 83 years old and had the hearing of a bloodhound. "Trouble in paradise, David?" she asked, eyeing my vandalized car with obvious glee. Mrs. Patterson lived for neighborhood drama. "Nothing I can't handle," I replied, taking another sip of coffee. "That wife of yours came by around midnight," she continued, not bothering to hide her excitement. "Had some young man with her. Fancy sports car. They were out here for about an hour, making all kinds of noise." Young man? That would be Sarah's lover, though she didn't know I knew about him yet. I'd been collecting evidence for months, waiting for the right moment to play that card. "Thanks for the heads up, Mrs. Patterson." I called my insurance company, then my lawyer, then a towing service. By 10 a.m., my car was gone and I was sitting in Jake Morrison's law office downtown, laying out my next moves. Jake had been my father-in-law's attorney for 20 years before becoming mine. He was a thin, sharp-eyed man who looked like he'd been carved out of granite and dressed in expensive suits. "They're going to fight dirty," Jake warned, reviewing the police report I'd filed about the vandalism. "Margaret's already called my office 3 times this morning, threatening to sue for fraud, coercion, and about 6 other things that don't apply to your situation. Can she win? Not a chance. Robert was completely competent when he made the transfer, and he had independent legal counsel. But she can make the process expensive and time-consuming." I leaned back in the leather chair, thinking, what if we go on the offensive instead of just playing defense? Jake raised an eyebrow. "What did you have in mind?" I pulled out my phone and opened the photo gallery. For the past 6 months, I'd been documenting everything. Sarah's spending habits, her lies about working late, her mysterious text messages, and most importantly, her affair with Brad Collins, a 28-year-old wannabe entrepreneur who'd been sniffing around the company for 2 years. "Jesus Christ," Jake muttered, scrolling through the photos. "How long has this been going on?" "About 18 months, as far as I can tell. He thinks he's going to marry into money and get a piece of the company. She thinks he actually loves her instead of her bank account." Jake set down the phone and looked at me with something approaching respect. "You've been planning this for a while, haven't you?" 3 years, I admitted. Ever since the first time she called me worthless in front of her friends. I started documenting everything, building relationships with Robert, learning the business inside and out. I knew eventually she'd push too far. And now? Now I want to file for divorce. And I want to make sure she gets exactly what she deserves. Jake smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from him in months of meetings. "This is going to be fun." We spent the next 2 hours going through my evidence and planning our strategy. By the time I left his office, I felt like a general preparing for war instead of a victim scrambling for cover. My phone rang as I was walking to the rental car. "David!" Sarah's voice was calmer now, but I could hear the desperation underneath. "We need to talk. This has gone far enough." "Has it?" I asked, unlocking the car door. "I'm at the house I grew up in, the house my father built. You can't just kick me out of my own life." "Actually, I can, and I did. You should be getting the divorce papers this afternoon." Silence. Then, "Divorce papers? Did you think last night was just about the company, Sarah? This is about everything. Our marriage, your lies, your boyfriend, Brad." "Yeah, I know about Brad." I could practically hear her heart stop beating. "David, I can explain." "No need. I have pictures, videos, text messages, hotel receipts. Jake Morrison has enough evidence to prove adultery 6 times over." "You've been spying on me?" The outrage in her voice was almost funny. "Almost. I've been protecting myself. There's a difference." "David, please. We can work this out. I made mistakes, but we can fix this." "The only mistake you made was underestimating me for 3 years. Everything else was a choice." I hung up and drove to Murphy's boxing gym on the south side of town. It was a rundown place that smelled like sweat and leather, with a clientele that wouldn't know a stock option from a sock drawer. In other words, it was perfect. Tommy Murphy, the owner, was a 60-year-old ex-heavyweight who'd taken me under his wing when I started coming around 2 years ago. He was the only person in my life who'd never cared about my wife's money or my lack of it. "You look like hell," he said as I walked through the door. "Feel worse than I look." "Good. That means you're ready to work." For the next hour, I beat the hell out of a heavy bag, working out months of frustration and rage. Tommy held the bag steady, occasionally offering advice about my form or my life in general. "So you really did it," he said during a water break. "Non took down the princess and her evil mother. Just getting started. What's next?" I wiped sweat from my face with a towel and looked around the gym. This place was real, honest, everything my marriage hadn't been. Next, I show them what happens when you underestimate someone for too long. Tommy grinned, showing a gap where his left canine used to be. "This is gonna be good." As I was leaving the gym, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. You made a big mistake, asshole. We're coming for you. I showed the message to Tommy, who just laughed. Looks like they're scared, he said. Good. Scared people make stupid decisions. Driving home in my rental car, I couldn't help but smile. For the first time in years, I was looking forward to tomorrow. The war was just getting started. The divorce papers hit Sarah like a sledgehammer to the face. I knew this because Mrs. Patterson called me at work the next day to give me a play-by-play of the meltdown. She was screaming so loud, I thought someone was being murdered, Mrs. Patterson reported gleefully. Then she threw something through the front window, glass everywhere. That boyfriend of hers showed up about an hour later in his fancy red car. Brad Collins drove a Ferrari 458, bought with money Sarah had been funneling to him through fake consulting contracts. I had documentation of every transaction, courtesy of my new position as majority owner of Blackstone Industries. Thanks for keeping me informed, I told Mrs. Patterson. Oh, this is better than my soap operas. What happens next? If only she knew. I was sitting in my new corner office, Sarah's old corner office, reviewing quarterly reports when Jake Morrison called with
It was one time at the company retreat.
Your coworker posted a photo. You're wearing this shirt.
Watch more on Grammarly.com.
an update. Margaret hired Harrison, Wells & Associates, he said. They're expensive, but they're not miracle workers. They've already filed 3 motions that have 0 chance of success. What kind of motions? They want to invalidate the stock transfer, claiming Robert was mentally incompetent. They want to freeze all company assets pending investigation. And they want a restraining order preventing you from making any major business decisions. I leaned back in Sarah's old chair, looking out at the city skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows. Will any of that work? Not a chance. I've got medical records proving Robert's competency, independent witnesses to the transfer, and documentation showing this was planned months in advance. They're throwing everything at the wall to see what sticks. So we wait, and we prepare for the next phase. The next phase came sooner than expected. That afternoon, I was reviewing personnel files when my assistant buzzed me. Mr. Thompson, there are some people here to see you. They say they're friends of Mrs. Thompson, Sarah's inner circle. The Mean Girls Club, as I'd always thought of them. 5 women who'd never worked a day in their lives, but somehow considered themselves experts on business, marriage, and morality. Send them in. They filed into my office like a delegation from hell. Jennifer Walsh led the pack, a blonde ice queen whose husband owned half the commercial real estate in the city. Behind her came Lisa Chen, whose family money dated back to the railroad boom. Then Amanda Foster, whose pharmaceutical fortune bought her a seat on every charity board in town. Rebecca Martinez rounded out the group, her tech money newer, but no less impressive. They arranged themselves in front of my desk like a tribunal. David, Jennifer said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. We need to talk. About what? About what you've done to Sarah. This vendetta has gone far enough. I set down the personnel file I'd been reading and gave them my full attention. Vendetta? Is that what we're calling it when someone stands up for themselves? You've destroyed her life, Lisa interjected. Taken her job, her home, her family's business. All because your ego couldn't handle being married to a successful woman. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. These were the same women who'd spent 3 years making jokes about my unemployment at dinner parties, who'd whispered about how Sarah had married down, who'd treated me like hired help at social events. Successful? I laughed. Sarah never earned a dime in her life. Everything she had was handed to her by her father, including me, apparently. That's not true, Amanda said. Sarah worked incredibly hard to build her career. Sarah worked hard at spending company money on fake consulting contracts for her boyfriend. Does the name Brad Collins ring a bell? The silence that followed was deafening. Jennifer's face went pale. You don't know what you're talking about, Rebecca said, but her voice lacked conviction. I opened my desk drawer and pulled out a thick manila folder. Bank records, hotel receipts, text messages, photos. Sarah's been having an affair for 18 months and using company funds to support her lover's lifestyle. Would you like to see the evidence? I spread some of the photos across my desk. Sarah and Brad at the Marriott downtown. Sarah and Brad at a restaurant in the next city over. Sarah and Brad in his Ferrari, her hand on his thigh. Jennifer picked up one of the photos with shaking fingers. This, this can't be real. It's real, all of it. Your friend Sarah isn't the victim here. She's a cheating, lying, manipulative woman who finally got caught. Lisa was staring at a bank statement showing a $50,000 transfer to Brad's consulting company. She told us you were having an affair. She said that's why she was divorcing you. Of course she did. Sarah's never taken responsibility for anything in her life. Why start now? The women exchanged glances, their unified front cracking like ice in spring. Even if this is true, Jennifer said slowly, what you've done is cruel. Taking everything from her, humiliating her in public. Cruel? I stood up, my patience finally snapping. You want to know what's cruel? 3 years of being treated like a servant in my own marriage. 3 years of being called a deadbeat and a loser, while I was actually learning this business inside and out. 3 years of watching my wife spend company money on her boyfriend while telling everyone I was the financial burden. I walked around the desk to face them directly. You 5 women made my life hell at every social event, every dinner party, every charity function. You treated me like I was lucky to be in the same room with you. And now, you want to lecture me about cruelty? Amanda was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks. We didn't know. You didn't want to know. It was easier to assume I was the problem. Easier to believe Sarah's lies than to see what was really happening. Rebecca stood up abruptly. We should go. Yes, you should. And ladies, don't come back. You're not welcome in this building anymore. They filed out without another word, their expensive heels clicking on the marble floor. Through my window, I watched them huddle in the parking lot, probably trying to figure out how they'd been so wrong about everything. My phone rang. Tommy Murphy. How'd the meeting go? He asked. How did you know about the meeting? Your assistant called me. Said you might need backup if things got ugly. I smiled. My assistant was a 60-year-old woman named Dorothy, who'd worked for the company for 30 years. Apparently, she'd never liked Sarah much. It went fine. They saw the evidence and realized they'd been backing the wrong horse. Good. Listen, I got some information you might find interesting about that boyfriend of your wife's. I'm listening. Remember my nephew Joey? The one who works for the credit reporting agency? He did some digging on Brad Collins. Turns out, your boy's got some serious financial problems. Gambling debts mostly. Owes money to some very unfriendly people. This was getting better by the minute. How much money? 200,000, give or take. Word is, he was planning to marry your wife and use her money to pay off his debts. Was planning? Well, that was before you took all her money away. Now he's stuck with the debts and no way to pay them. I sat down heavily in my chair, my mind racing. Tommy, you're a genius. I have my moments. What are you thinking? I'm thinking Brad Collins is about to have a very bad week. After hanging up with Tommy, I called Jake Morrison and filled him in on the new information. Within an hour, he'd confirmed everything through his own sources. This changes the game completely, Jake said. If Brad's desperate enough, he might do something stupid, something that could hurt Sarah or implicate her in his financial problems, or something that could provide us with even more ammunition for the divorce. David, be careful. Desperate people are dangerous people. I hung up and stared out my window at the city below. Somewhere out there, Sarah and Brad were probably planning their next move, trying to figure out how to salvage their situation. They had no idea how much worse things were about to get. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. We need to meet. Tonight. Just the two of us. Please. I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, Murphy's boxing gym. 8 p.m. Come alone. Time to end this face-to-face. Sarah showed up at Murphy's boxing gym 20 minutes late, wearing a black designer dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. She looked completely out of place among the heavy bags and speed bags, like a swan that had wandered into a chicken coop. I was working the speed bag when she walked in, my rhythm steady and hypnotic. Tap, 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 tap. I didn't acknowledge her presence, just kept working, letting her stand there in her expensive heels on the stained concrete floor. David! Her voice was softer than I'd heard it in years. Thank you for agreeing to meet me. Tap, 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 tap. I finished my set and grabbed a towel, wiping sweat from my face before turning to look at her. You're late. I know, I'm sorry. Traffic was... You're always late, Sarah. Late to our wedding. Late to dinner parties. Late to realize what you had before you threw it away. She flinched like I'd slapped her. Good. Tommy emerged from his office in the back, took one look at Sarah and shook his head. I'll be in the office if you need anything, he said to me. The message was clear. He'd be watching in case things went sideways. Sarah looked around the gym with obvious distaste. Why here? Why couldn't we meet somewhere civilized? Because this is the only place in my life that was ever real. No pretense, no lies, no games. Just work and honesty. She wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly looking smaller. David, I know I hurt you. I know I made mistakes, but what you've done, it's destroyed everything. Everything you took for granted, you mean? That's not fair, I laughed, a harsh sound that echoed off the concrete walls. Fair? You want to talk about fair? Was it fair when you called me a deadbeat in front of the entire board of directors? Was it fair when you told your friends I was too lazy to get a real job? Was it fair when you spent 18 months fucking Brad Collins while lying to my face every single day? Tears started running down her cheeks, smearing her perfect makeup. I never meant for it to happen with Brad. It just did. Bullshit. You made a choice. Every time you met him at that hotel, every time you transferred company money to his fake consulting business, every time you lied to me about working late. Those were all choices. I was lonely, she exploded. You were always so distant, so cold. Brad made me feel special, appreciated. I was distant because you spent 3 years treating me like garbage. And Brad made you feel special because he wanted your money, not because he loved you. I pulled out my phone and showed her the credit report Tommy's nephew had provided. Your boyfriend owes $200,000 to some very dangerous people. Gambling debts. He was using you to pay them off. Sarah's face went white as she read the report. This can't be true. It's true, every word. Brad Collins never loved you, Sarah. He saw a lonely, insecure woman with access to money, and he played you like a violin. She sank down onto a bench, her legs giving out. Oh my God. Oh my God, what have I done? You threw away your marriage, your family's respect, and your company for a con man who was planning to leave you the moment his debts were paid. David, please. I know I messed up. I know I hurt you. But we can fix this. We can go to counseling, work through our problems. I sat down across from her, close enough to see the desperation in her eyes. Sarah, do you remember our wedding day? She nodded, confused by the change in direction. Do you remember what you said in your vows? You promised to love me in good times and bad, for richer or poorer. But the moment you thought I was the poor one in this relationship, you started treating me like dirt. That's not true. It's completely true. When you thought I was just some guy who got lucky marrying into money, I was worthless to you. Now that you know I actually earned your father's respect and trust, suddenly I'm worth fighting for. She was crying harder now, her shoulders shaking. I do love you, David. I always have. No, you don't. You love the idea of me. You love having someone to control and belittle. You love feeling superior. But you don't love me. I stood up and walked to the window overlooking the street. Brad's Ferrari was parked across the street, engine running. He was waiting for her, probably listening to their conversation through her phone. Your boyfriend's outside, I said without turning around. Sarah's head snapped up. What? Red Ferrari across the street. He's been there for 10 minutes. Did you really think I wouldn't notice? She fumbled for her phone, and I heard her typing frantically, probably telling Brad to leave. David, he's not part of this. This conversation is just between us. I turned around and looked at her with something approaching pity. Sarah, even now, even after everything that's happened, you're still lying to me. You can't help yourself. I'm not lying. You told your friends I was having an affair to justify your own cheating. You've been stealing company money for months to support your boyfriend's gambling habit. You vandalized my car and sent me threatening text messages. And now you're sitting here pretending he's not involved in this conversation when he's literally parked outside, listening to every word. The fight went out of her like air from a punctured balloon. She slumped forward, her hands covering her face. "What do you want from me?" she whispered. "I want you to sign the divorce papers without contest. I want you to admit publicly that you've been having an affair. And I want you to stay away from me and the company. And if I don't?" I walked over to the heavy bag and threw a hard right cross that made it swing wildly. The sound echoed through the gym like a gunshot. Then I release everything to the press. Photos, bank records, hotel receipts, text messages. Your affair becomes front-page news in the business section. Brad's gambling debts become public knowledge, along with how you helped him hide from his creditors. Your mother's threats and harassment get reported to the police. Sarah looked up at me with red, swollen eyes. "You've changed. You used to be kind. I used to be naive. There's a difference." She stood up slowly, smoothing down her dress. "Fine, you win. I'll sign your papers." "Good." She walked toward the door, then stopped and turned back. "David, for what it's worth, I really am sorry about all of it." "I know you are, Sarah. But sorry doesn't fix 3 years of damage." She nodded and walked out into the night. Through the window, I watched her get into Brad's Ferrari. They sat there for a few minutes, probably arguing, then drove away into the darkness. Tommy emerged from his office carrying 2 beers. "That seemed to go well," he said, handing me one of the bottles. "Better than I expected." "You think she'll actually sign the papers?" I took a long drink of beer and considered the question. "She'll sign them. She doesn't have a choice anymore." "What about the boyfriend?" "Brad Collins is about to have much bigger problems than a messy divorce. His creditors aren't going to wait much longer for their money." Tommy raised his beer bottle in a mock toast. "Here's to